roughly, I'm not going to go into great detail, but a game is essentially the attempt to achieve a particular end by overcoming unnecessary obstacles. So for instance, if the game of golf involves getting a little ball into a hole, that's the end. Or actually probably the end is to score higher than somebody else, but let's say the end is to get the ball in the hole. But you can't just use any means whatsoever to do that. You can't fire it from a gun, or you can't roll it in with your hand or kick it in as some people do. You have to use one of those clubs of a particular sort, and you have to abide by the rules. These are unnecessary obstacles that are put in the way. And that's what makes it a game, and not it's not something other than a game. It's a game because of that. And he fleshes this out, and it's actually quite a plausible definition of what a game is. And so that's a challenge to the Wittgenstein's own example of something that was obviously a family resemblance term. So perhaps we can do the same with art. I mean, it is possible, and this it just may be quite difficult to do. It's not necessarily logically impossible to define what art is. We may be just waiting for the Bernard suits of art to do that. So I think, anyway, that's an aside, but I do think the question how we should live is related to the question what is art, because we want to explore the possibilities of doing various things in life. And there are people who think that we shouldn't spend too much time with art. I mean, Plato famously wanted to exclude artists from his Republic because he thought they corrupt the moral development of philosophers, philosopher kings, who would be philosopher kings and queens, because art deals in illusions. It was tied up with his particular metaphysical system where it puts visual representation is at several removes from reality, but also because some kinds of art involve impersonation of immoral characters, and that is somehow contagious. There are all kinds of dangers associated with art. That doesn't seem to be a modern worry, unless you're talking about computer games, of course. You know, Oculus Rift is about to hit the shops. Oculus Rift is this incredible virtual reality machine, which is a kind of work of art, actually. It's close to being a work of art. It allows people to be totally immersed in a game world. And I think many of Plato's arguments will be resurrected in relation to what people end up doing in these virtual game-created worlds. But there's another kind of attack that's going on as well. In the last few months, or the last year, Peter Singer has been arguing that philanthropists, rich philanthropists, like the benefactor of this museum, shouldn't be focusing on art. They shouldn't buy a new wing for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. They should donate their money to charities which produce predictable effects in terms of saving lives. There are millions of children in poverty. There are millions of people dying from curable diseases. It's inhumane to focus on the arts, to channel your money and time in the arts while this is going on. And in our lifetime, there will not be an end to poverty, there will not be an end to famine and disease. You could buy, for the price of the, if we were to go off discreetly auction the Calder hanging from the ceiling up there, with the money that we got from that, we could possibly save thousands of children's lives, or definitely, according to Peter Singer. So there are these people saying that art is not a valuable thing in relation to human lives, and I think, well, that does force back on us the question: what is art? Why? If you think an art museum is something that is culturally important, that it's the kind of thing that and art museums can't flourish in the current financial climate without rich philanthropists donating works by contemporary artists, because very few countries can provide the kind of money that's required to buy iconic works by living artists now. They're just absurdly expensive. And recently dead artists, to buy a decent collection of pop art. This is stuff that's been created in my lifetime, a lot of it, or just about. it's beyond almost any European national collection. So it requires philanthropists. And there are these people who say, well, no, actually, art isn't something which can be compared to human suffering. So human suffering always trumps anything to do with the arts. You know, this idea of trumping, if you have a card, you know, I've got a card that's in the hearts, it always beats every other card if the hearts are trumps. So concern for human suffering always trumps any concern with the arts. So I think if you want to defend the arts, you need to know what you're talking about. And actually the process of thinking about what art is clarifies that, leads to the kind of focus on the things that matter. Don't worry, this gets shorter as I go on, the answers to why we might think about art. Very briefly, some people are highly motivated to solve puzzles. Some people love crossword puzzles, Sudoku. There are a whole range of human activities that are quite satisfying in themselves. And once you've started down that route, you know you've got to finish the thing. You've got to get that last clue. You've got to fill in that last number. And for some philosophers, the question, what is art, is a really intriguing little puzzle. It's like a crossword puzzle philosophy. Picking up on what I was saying about Wittgenstein, there is the puzzle yet to be solved. So it's like a puzzle with a big prize. If you could solve the puzzle, what art is, that would be a really great achievement. And I'm not denigrating it by saying it's a puzzle. I mean, for me, that's not what motivates me in philosophy. But I want to acknowledge that for some people, why ask what art is because it's a really intriguing puzzle. And you take a few steps in and it's a lot tougher to come up with a good solution than you thought it was when you started. So it's quite common for me, as a philosopher who's written a bit about art and who talks in art galleries and so on, to meet people who say, oh, you know, art is beautiful structures presented for a public. Or they'll come up with their own theory and think it's obviously solves all the problems about what art is. But if they stop and reflect a bit, there have been so many moves made in this philosophical area, and sometimes the elaborations and ad hoc clauses get very, very dense, and you end up with something almost like a legalistic definition. And that's really just trying to be completely watertight to solve the puzzle. But I think, just to end, there's something else we should think about, which is should take us back to works of art. That often, acknowledging that we probably won't today come up with a completely satisfactory definition of what art is. I hope I'm not disparaging the later speakers by saying that, but it's unlikely, let's say, that in the course of the day, the true account of what art is will emerge, one that's going to be absolutely taken up by people and say, this is what art is. Accepting that, which you might not want to do, I think that the process of asking a question and trying earnestly and sincerely to answer it often allows us to see things differently. Things being the objects, the works of art themselves too, not just things generally. So Wittgenstein famously used this figure of well, it's either a duck looking one way or a rabbit looking the other way. If you haven't seen it before, it's fairly obvious the duck's looking that way and the rabbit's looking that way. Can you all see that?
It's a form of seeing as.
Yeah, so exactly, it's a form of seeing as. And Wittgenstein talked about aspect seeing, so you can see it as a duck or as a rabbit. And now it's become so popular, I believe you can also see it as a duck-rabbit, as a duck-rabbit figure, which you're not supposed to be able to do, because it's a gestalt shift from one to the other. But I think, and particularly when you've got a schematic form, as we've used it in the podcast that I make with David Edmonds, we use it as our logo. And there's a reason for this, because I think philosophy is often about coming to see things differently. You don't have a different retinal image, the same reflections from the screen are reaching your eye when you see it as a duck as when you see it as a rabbit, but you organise it differently. You have this shift and you suddenly see, aha, that's what it is. And I think that, just to give you an example of how that might work in the visual arts, if you go back to Edam Le Guin's This Is Not My Bed, if you read the name backwards, you realise it says Nigel Made, and actually this is my bed this morning in the hotel room. So I was pulling your leg. This is not a work of art by a parodic British, or is it? Maybe it is. Parodic British artist alluding to Tracy Emin. It was just an example being used for as a joke. But that's now you see it differently. You probably will see weaknesses in the image and see how could it be better, or learn something about me which I don't want to be learned, or you start scrutinising it in a completely different way. And I think often, having thought about what art is, that's what we do. So personally, going to this work in Tate Modern, I thought about it differently, having thought about what art is. So I used to just walk past thinking, oh, that's somebody just shoving a tree in there. But I was thinking about it in relation to Collingwood's theory of art, which is all about art as the expression of emotion and clarifying an inchoate emotion, something that starts as a vague emotion, gradually making it more precise. So the process of designing while making, the process of making it more precise is very important. And for Collingwood, it never has an end point. That actually, because I was teaching a course and I was thinking about that, I started thinking about, oh, well, how was this made? And you look at it more closely, it's actually a huge block of wood, and what Pannoni's done is cut back to the tree within the block of wood. So in effect, he's finding, now I made the mistake of saying, is it a younger tree within? I don't think I can't remember the trees grow from the outer ring or the inner ring, but it looks as if he's found the youth of the tree within the block of wood. You start thinking about this not just as it looks like a big tree stuck in an art gallery, but about the process and what kind of emotions he was expressing. And it becomes almost a metaphor for self-understanding, for psychoanalysis perhaps, discovering a younger thing within an older thing, that just by following back the knots, the knots in a big hewn slab of wood, something, you follow back those and carve them back, and you discover within it something beautiful and different. So for me, that was an example of how thinking about what art is can take you back to a work of art and involve a kind of gestalt shift, which is often what a critic is trying to do with you as well, trying to make you see something differently. So I hope today, thinking about what art is takes you back to artworks, and for me this is one of the most important things that thinking about art can do, make you see actual works of art differently. Thank you very much.